in Baltimore or wherever you are joining from today. Well, my name is Leah and I am all about spending less and creating more. So today I'm going to be sharing with you some breakfast and bread items we'll be creating with our less. We are in a low spend budget challenge month and I am ready to get some sweet treats made, some items for breakfast. If you missed the recipe video that I shared with you showing the baking soda bread, I will have that linked. You can try that out. Today, for the no yeast bread, I am using baking powder. I finally bought the container that we needed, so we have plenty of baking powder to use. So let's get started. The recipe that's going to take the longest is our soft sandwich bread. So I have my oven preheating to 400 and I'm going to get all of this stuff mixed into my bread maker. That way I don't have to worry about kneading it myself. This is so convenient to have. If you have a bread maker, go ahead and use that. If you don't, you can do all of this in your stand mixer or even by hand. You're going to knead the dough for 8 minutes, rest for 15. Knead it again for 3 more minutes, and then you're going to cover it and let it rest for an hour in a warm place. And then we will come back and work on this part together. So regardless of how you are doing your kneading and resting process, this down here will be the same. So we've got our water, our 2 teaspoons of yeast, got our sugar in there, and now 3 cups of flour. I am just using good old-fashioned all-purpose flour. If you are intimidated by working with yeast or making homemade bread, just give it a try one time, see if you like it. It's probably not as hard as you're making it out to be. So now that we've got our flour in there, I'm gonna let that kind of mix around for a minute and then add our salt. Just doing the dough setting. And that's just going to mix it and rest and do all of the timing for us. I'm just using some kosher salt, get that seasoned in there, and then we're gonna just let it go. Next, we are going to be working on our baking powder bread. I'm gonna do this by hand. First, I need 2 1/4 cups of warm milk. Need 1/4 cup of oil. And you can either use vegetable oil, canola oil, or even melted butter. 1/4 cup is the same as half a stick of butter. Now we need 3 teaspoons of sugar. And because I'm already doing a sandwich bread, I want to make this a nice breakfast bread that we can just put some warm butter on it, cinnamon and sugar. So I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and then we need 8 teaspoons of baking powder. We need 1 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. Just going to give this a nice mix to combine all those ingredients, and then we're going to add 4 cups of flour. This is so bubbly. It just like started expanding like crazy. So I probably should have got a bigger bowl. This is really the biggest bowl I have. See, it's a very sticky, wet dough. This bread recipe actually needs it to be at 430 degrees and then bake it for 30 minutes and down to 390. So I just put the oven back up higher to 430. We're going to put this into a parchment-lined loaf pan. Now I'm going to use wet hands to help flatten this out a little bit. Use just a wet spatula or an oiled spatula. Just want that to be a little bit more even. Next, I want to make some lemon drop scones. Now, my mom has an amazing recipe for drop scones. She's given it to me, but I don't think it's available for sharing yet. I think it's still a little secret. So we're going to try this first recipe I found, and I'm going to be using my cheese grater to grate all of the cold butter into the flour because it's gonna be much easier to incorporate that way. So first we're going to put in our flour, baking powder, and sugar, and those are all in threes. 3 cups of flour, 1/3 cup of sugar, and 3 teaspoons of baking powder. Next, we're gonna have some good washed lemons and zest 2 of them. And then we need 3/4 cup of our lemon juice. So I just squeezed that out, measured until I had what I needed. We're gonna put that into a small bowl. We're gonna add our egg to the lemon juice, whisk that together. And now we're going to grate our cold butter into our dry ingredients. Now we are going to pour in our liquid just until it forms. You don't want to mix it too much. This is still a little dry, so I'm just going to add a little bit of water and see if I can get it to be more of a drop consistency. Then we're just going to drop spoonfuls of this onto our parchment or silicone mat lined baking sheet. So now that it's been 20 minutes, put the heat down to 390 and cover this with foil. And then it goes back into the oven for 20 more minutes. I'm gonna set these aside until the oven is cleared out of that bread. And then we're gonna get these put into the oven at 400 degrees. Next, we're going to make the glaze for our scones. So I've got 1 lemon juice out of that. And then we're going to do 2 cups of our powdered sugar or icing sugar. All right, so I got 1 lemon squeezed out. It's not gonna be enough, but I do have some of this lemon juice. We're gonna add that. All right, so now we're gonna get 4 tablespoons of this lemon juice. If it's really thick, you can decide how thin you want it to be. I'm gonna thin it out a little bit more. So now we got our bread out of the oven and we're going to let it cool. It's gonna be very fragile, so we wanna let it cool before attempting to slice it. And now that our oven is preheated to 400, we're gonna get these scones in here. Let that go for about 18 minutes. Next, we are moving on to banana nut muffins. You could either use nuts or chocolate chips or just leave them as banana. You could add peanut butter, different things, but we're going to start with some mashed bananas I had in my freezer, just thawed those out. 1 egg, we're gonna use vanilla, cinnamon, baking soda, brown sugar, flour, and some regular vegetable or canola oil, or you could use butter. So we want 1.5 cups of mashed banana. So we're gonna see how much we have. And this is not an exact science, so. Perfect, 1.5 cups of banana. We're going to do 1 egg, 1/3 cup of oil. Now, every recipe that I follow that calls for cinnamon, I feel like they just don't have you add enough cinnamon. So I always double it. I called for 1 teaspoon of cinnamon and I just put 2 teaspoons. You're also going to need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. We need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. We need 1/2 cup of brown sugar. And then we need 1.5 cups of flour. Now to our batter, you're gonna add your toppings like chocolate chips or nuts. I'm just gonna add in a couple of handfuls of pecans. And then once we have this stirred in, we're gonna cover it and let it rest for 15 minutes. So now while these are warm, you're gonna take some of your glaze and just drizzle it on top or spread it. Donut. Our bread maker has finished doing our dough for us. So I have our loaf pan with the parchment paper again. Just deflated our dough. We're going to flour our surface. Just coat that a little bit in that flour, dust off the excess, and then I'm gonna stretch it out like this. We're just gonna roll it into our log, fold the ends. We have our loaf. So we're gonna put it into our pan, and now we're going to cover it and let it rise for 30 minutes. I like to let the bread rise in a warm spot. The easiest place I feel like is on top of my oven that's turned on, so I just keep it on the stove top. Now the back of my stove gets really hot, so I just keep it here in the front. So that has been 9 minutes in the oven. I'm going to lower the temperature down to 375 for another 13 minutes. We're getting the oven back to 400 degrees for our sandwich bread. So now we're gonna put our bread into the oven at 400 degrees and set the timer for 30 minutes. Now we've got the bread out of the oven. And this is without putting any kind of milk or egg wash on it. I don't really find that it's necessary, but you wanna just check. I mean, it might be done in 25 minutes like this one, or you could bake it up to 30 minutes. It just depends on how much it's risen and how dense it is. So I went with 25 minutes on this one. I hope that these recipes are giving you some inspiration of what you might be able to make with things that are in your kitchen. And if you're enjoying videos like this, I would love for you to give it a thumbs up. Every like helps my channel so much. And of course, until the next video, I'll see you down in the comments.